and we talked about the triple crises we were experiencing. Of course, the pandemic, racial uprising that was really beginning in the United States and other parts of the world at that time, and of course the climate crisis. Hi, welcome. We looked at those and we imagined ourselves and our entire human world inside of a chrysalis. We imagined ourselves breaking down into our component parts and what we wanted the world to look like when we emerged after this had ended. And so in these workshops, people drew pictures, they used whatever they had in their home, they painted their visions of what they wanted the world to look like when we moved out of this phase and into the next. They wrote poems, they just poured their hearts and souls into their artwork. And then they took their papers and they folded them over and they wrote a letter. So at this time, our community was in the process of creating a climate mitigation plan. And you know how those plans go, right? They're often like a little lip service that's put on a desk and then never looked at again. But we were determined that that was not going to happen. And so on the backs of their paintings, of their poems, they wrote letters to local elected officials. And in these letters, they talked about where they were, how they were feeling in this early stages of the pandemic. They said what they were doing for the climate themselves and what they committed to doing from there on forward. And then they asked, and in some cases they demanded that local elected officials take strong climate action, that they pass and implement the Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan. They then took their letters with their artwork, folded it up, and sent it through the mail to their officials. I could tell you all kinds of stories about how those letters impacted those local elected officials, but I'll just tell you one. During our county's county commissioner meeting where they were voting as to whether or not to adopt that plan, one of the county commissioners, Ty Metzner, he stood up when it was his turn to give his testimony, and he pulled a letter from his pocket, this letter. He said he'd been carrying this letter around for months as his guiding light. It was written by a high school climate activist. He then read this letter as his testimony for why they should pass and implement the Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan. And that night, not only did they pass the plan, they also voted to declare a climate emergency in our county.